Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the greenhouse. Rad Mom here. Uh, we had a bit of a warm spell. Yay. So I'm out here with you tonight. We're going to be doing a little mom stuff. We're looking at a study that mirrors the child income tax credit we've had over the last couple of years here in the United States. And once again, the scientists are telling us what we already know. In this case, it is that if you give mothers the resources to take care of their children, they do. Like this video if you enjoy this kind of content, or you just maybe enjoy my company, and subscribe to the channel for more mom stuff and more materialist approach to radical feminism. Let's dive in.
A new study investigating the link between child poverty and infant brain development has found that providing poor mothers with cash stipends for the first year of their children's lives appears to have changed their baby's brain activity in ways associated with stronger cognitive development. Mothers in the study's experimental group received $333 a month and will continue to do so until their children are at least 4 years old. This comes as families across the nation say they're struggling to afford basic necessities after child tax credit payments previously authorized by the American Rescue Plan abruptly stopped. The Center on...
Yeah. Really, if you give new mothers the resources to take care of their babies, they do. It's almost like most mothers try to do their job. And when they're little like that, that job is actually fairly simple. You feed them, you bathe them, you make sure they're warm enough and that they're getting enough rest. That's it. It's really not complicated when they're that little. There's none of the weird psychological torment that comes with older children at that age. And yeah, the child tax credits were an unusual recognition of the fact that mothering is work. Someone has to do it. Someone has to produce and rear the next generation of the human race. Okay? To not even mention the fact that everyone has one. We'll just leave that aside as an assumed. Okay? If you don't want kids, great. But if you do, that should also be great. I mean, the idea that as a very young mother, when the child is very, very small, a lot of times you get maybe 3-6 weeks in this country of maternity leave, and then you're expected to turn this tiny infant who is essentially still a part of yourself physically over to someone else, be it your own mother, another female relative, or a friend, or a daycare center, which can absorb pretty much all of the paycheck from the job that you're going to. So this is the only thing that makes a system like that even remotely feasible or sensible in any way. And yeah, I really think that giving people a sense of that, a concrete sense of that in their daily lives, was a mistake. I've heard so many people say that you can, cut entitlements down, you can trim them, you can shave them, but they don't really take them back. You can't really take them back. No one's going to vote for that. No one's going to give up their Social Security payments, right? Like, that's not going to happen. So to have this just expire, like, oh, you better stop having children now because it is once again unaffordable, is not only obscene and absurd, it's unprecedented as far as I know.
on Poverty and Social Policy estimates that without a renewal of the CTC, the monthly child poverty rate could increase from 12.1% to 17.1%, the highest it would have been since December 2020. Dr. Hiro Yoshikawa joins us now to weigh in. He's a professor of globalization and education at NYU Steinhardt and a professor at New York University. Welcome to Rising.
Wow, right? So we do have a woman on the panel, and she's going to ask a really good question here in a minute. And kind of embarrass the guy. It's great. We'll get there. Oh, gosh, I'm sorry. What did he say?
Awa joins us now to weigh in. Increase policy estimates that without a renewal...
Oh, yeah. Well, obviously the attitude is, fuck those kids, because their parents are poor. So obviously they're doing something wrong in our miraculous meritocracy.
And education at NYU Steinhardt and a professor at New York University. Welcome to Rising.
Thank you very much.
So it's quite a coincidence, I guess, that the amount of money...
I just want to say, if you're hearing random rattlings and thumps, it's because the cat is out here with us tonight. Maybe you'll get to meet her in a minute. We'll see.
Money going out monthly to parents here is pretty close to what the child tax credit was offering. So we kind of have a real world examination of what the consequences are of providing that support or of taking it away. Were you surprised at the robustness?
So that's unethical though, right? Okay. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit because they are going to find, shall we say, a striking, excuse me, result. Excuse me. Let's have another cigarette, shall we? Anyway, they do find a striking result in the study, and to have deprived other infants of it, I'm not sure that's ethical, actually.
Of the data that you were able to get from this?
Well, we started planning this study 10 years ago, so we certainly didn't foresee this expanded child tax credit coming. There's a lot of planning for a study like this.
Okay. And again, I'm not a professor of education or anything like that, but the federal government had a lot more people to deal with, and they managed to roll that out a hell of a lot faster than that.
And it started over 3 years ago. So we do think the findings are important because this is the first causal demonstration that poverty reduction provided in this way might influence infants' brain activity.
Okay. I'm assuming that's because functional magnetic resonance imaging machines where you can actually watch the brain work in real time are pretty new. And or because no one thought to check this before. But yeah, this is such a duh, isn't it, to anyone who's had children or known children or been a child?
As early as after 12 months of payments, and as early in development as at 12 months of age. But I should say that this payment that we studied has some differences with the child tax credit. First of all, that it was provided only to this particular newborn and not for additional children in the family.
That, I guess, would be the main difference, is that it's a lot more targeted and thus a lot more stingy. And here's Punky. Say hi, Punky. You're making your star debut. No, I think we met you last summer, maybe, but oh my goodness. Okay. Say bye-bye, Punky Cat. Oh. Where were we?
The theory for why that is the case, is it that this is money that can be used then to purchase food or proper nutrition?
This made me so mad the first time, talking about all this stuff so clinically. Why is it that when you give young new mothers, food for their money for to spend on their babies, do they buy then resources for the babies? I just can't imagine.
That kind of thing, and that will affect brain development?
Yeah, so we had two hypotheses, or two kind of buckets of what we think of as mechanisms. We're still analyzing these, so we don't actually have the results as to the mechanisms. But one is that parents might be investing in their children's development, as other studies suggest, that when parents
That's right.
have more income, they invested in their children's learning and development.
Yes. Wow. Other studies have suggested this. Yeah. Fascinating stuff, right? Just, like, he's sitting in a white room with a high ceiling. I mean, is that an ivory tower? I really just. Oh, yes. I wonder what happens if you give the poor mothers more money. Will they give more food to their babies? Gee, gosh, I just don't know. They're poor, so maybe they don't give a fuck about their kids. Look, what is this logic? What is the implied logic here? Okay, I wrote a while back about Joe Manchin saying that they needed to institute a work requirement for this. Because he didn't want any lazy people getting this. Like, hello, being a new mother is hard work. Okay, and the implication that mothers can't be trusted and mothers don't know what we are doing should have that man laughed out of Congress. And this is both vindicating and highly insulting.
Another is that there might be reductions in parents' stress levels because of the stresses that are associated with living in poverty and making ends meet.
Yes, I think two things can be true, right? Because if your kid isn't as hungry, then you're less stressed out about it. If you're not having to worry about feeding your kid, then you're not going to be worried about, yes. Why is he talking about separating those two things into different buckets? Would that indicate a fundamental misunderstanding of what the fuck is going on here?
Did you try raising the amount of money and lowering the amount of money to see if there was any sort of additional benefit or even detriment? So if you raised it up, let's say double that 333, was there double the benefit?
That's cute, right? Because what happens when you double 333? But she didn't say it. Classy. Because I, with my terrible math skills, would absolutely have walked right into that.
Unfortunately, a study like this is fairly
expensive
to begin with. So yeah, we didn't have these multiple conditions. That's a great idea. It would be important to kind of look at that. But this was the very first randomized experiment to randomly assign moms to either $333 a month, as you indicated, or the other group got $20 a month distributed on debit cards.
So $330 a month or nothing. Maybe a pack of diapers. I don't know exactly how much diapers are anymore because all of mine have been out of them for a couple of years anyway. But they're expensive. So, just... And he says it in a minute, like the mothers, they knew what the structure of the study was. That means that, the ones who received the $20 were aware that there were other mothers out there receiving, 300 plus. I don't know if they told them the amount, but, a significant amount of money, especially for a small child. So that's fun to think about.
One thing I've noticed about social policy research is that it can be so difficult to ever show any actual statistically significant results. I think because life is so complicated and there are so many variables and so many inputs. So any individual intervention winds up getting washed out by everything else that people have going on in their lives. So it's
Yeah, but these infants have nothing else going on in their lives, right? So I guess it would be really easy to spot that they are developing, a little ahead of their control peers. God, this can't be ethical.
striking to see this. How does this compare? How does the robustness of this intervention compare with other things that you've participated in and other studies generally that attempt to make this kind of change?
So one of the reasons this study is important is it's really virtually the first time in the United States that a poverty reduction intervention based on monthly cash gifts in this case was targeted to the first year of life. So we actually have very few comparisons out there. We know from a lot of correlational studies that income is associated with children's development. Most of those studies are done with children who are older.
Well, right, because, actually being there to deal with children that young is, well, again, ethically questionable, just in general, I'm really starting to think. And also, you have to be highly selective because just not every random woman you meet is pregnant, any given time. So you have to work harder to find them, I guess. And you just end up being more selective because of that. So it's good, right?
We were able to travel into these low-income.
Oh, you're right. No, that's what I was going to say. Is that access to more resources helps children flourish. More resources, up to a certain point. Just like there's the famous study that, up to a certain point, more income makes a person happier. And then past that point it becomes, and less of a thing because it becomes not something it becomes something you simply don't worry about every day anymore. And once you get to that point, then there's really, what more freedom from money can you have, right? So, oh gosh.
With children who are older. We were able to travel into these low-income moms' homes at 12 months and measure their infant's brain activity, which was measured through a kind of a soft cap placed on the infant's head.
Travel into their homes. That does sound adorable, though. Baby's first brain scan. Yay. Oh, my goodness. And you have to take a picture, right? The stories you could make up around that. Anyways, being a mom can be fun.
It's kind of like a microphone into the level of brain activity. And as we hypothesized, children's fast-paced brain activity increased significantly with higher levels in the $333 a month group compared to the $20 a month group.
Some studies of, for instance, benefits of preschool, those kinds of programs. Some of those studies are critics of those the idea that there's a lot of benefit to that. We'll point to things saying, well, by a certain age, the results have evened out. The people who went through this, the kids who went through the program and the kids who didn't go through the program end up looking about the same. Do you think that could be the case here, where you have some kind of early jumpstart on brain development, but by some age they're going to have the same level of their brain development anyway?
Okay, first of all, there's a difference between actual concrete brain development and being, kind of essentially teaching little kids to do tricks. Because, yeah, they can absorb a whole lot of stuff And then again, neurologically, and I think it's 6 to 7, 8 years old, something like that, there's a pruning that goes on, is what they call it, where all those extra connections get, well, sloughed off if they haven't been used, enough in the intervening period. Because you just kind of just go along learning everything, and then later on you only save the stuff that has ended up being important. Right. So that's why you can teach a 3, 4, 5-year-old to speak a foreign language. And then by the time they're 10, they don't really remember any of it. It's like childhood amnesia. And that's how you can turn, to your middle schooler and say, hey, you remember when blah? And they're like, no, what are you talking about? They mean it. Like, they really don't remember anything. It's very strange from the adult perspective sometimes. But these are two different things that he's asking about here, is my point. Okay. I don't think that this Head Start in development for these kids in the study is going to even out in the same way, because it's not the same thing. Measuring skill, acquisition of skills, and measuring actual brain development are two different things, dude.
Well, so that's a great question. It's far too early for us to know. We're going to keep following these kids, and the payments will continue up until the child turns 4. So this is after 1 year of a planned 4-year intervention, and so right now we can't really say. Right now, I think I would.
You watch. They're going to have fewer behavioral issues too.
Caution against saying that this should replace all early childhood interventions, or
right, because God forbid we have something that could do that. Like, I don't know, enabling their mothers to do their job.
Make us think that interventions like family support or early education are less important. I think all of these are important, but certainly poverty reduction, we believe, is an.
Like, I think he already kind of hinted at the fact that supporting the mother, especially of young children, is supporting the family and the child's education and the whole bit.
Important enough agenda item for the United States, where the rates of child poverty have remained stubbornly high for years, right? And we do know that the expanded child tax credit made quite a dent in that for the time that it was being implemented.
Yeah, but people are so squicky about this, right? Because you have to actually give money to poor people. Gosh, because you can't just give it directly to the children. Heaven knows what they'd spend it on. Most likely not vegetables, obviously. So you have to actually give it to the parents who've already made the mistake of being poor, right? They're not innocent in all this, right? So why should they get a gift? Because it's not like the system's rigged.
I'm curious, what are the parents who are enrolled either in the control group or the experiment group, what did they know about the experiment itself? Were they kind of at least psychologically incentivized to participate in their child's brain development?
Yes, they were. Whether this man and his study did anything in that regard or not. What the fuck kind of stupid question is this? Why the fuck do you think people who make less than $100,000 a year have children? It's. Do you think it's just because we don't know any better? And I mean, they keep trying to do away with any kind of abortion in this country. So, in some cases, yeah, that may be the case. But for the most part, no. Along the lines of how most women who do have abortions already have children. Most people on the lower end of the economic scale have their kids because they want them, just like everyone else.
Just to, make the people running the experiment, happy. You know what I mean? Like, did they feel like they were being washed when it came to their kids' brain development, or?
So this man is now insinuating that maybe these women only took better care of their children with this money because they were being watched. That maybe it wouldn't go this way if they weren't being observed by scientists in the study. And I really would love to see, we just had an opportunity to do exactly this on a large scale, right? Essentially. It's not quite as targeted, but you could have taken infants born in the last 2 fucking years and, I don't know, measured their brain development against controls from, I don't know, maybe, I don't know. I don't know where you would find those controls. Because, again, what are you supposed to do? Take money away from little children? Wow. Wow. Because, again, mothers can't be trusted to carry and take care of their children, to do their best. Right? That's not the obvious thing.
Because there's a control and an experimental group that doesn't really play in. How did you account for that?
That's a great nuanced methodological question. So, so let me answer.
I do not understand why he is so. Really? You don't have to kiss ass quite so hard, dude.
That by saying that, yes, sometimes we might worry if the outcome of child development was reported by the mothers, for example, right? Because they might be biased in terms of the amount of cash they're receiving to perceive that their child's development is doing better. And so in this case, we actually measured infants' brain activity directly.
Right.
And okay, so you can't have reporting bias, and that's great. But I feel like he didn't even answer his question.
So that effect on increased brain activity is one that we're confident in. The intervention itself did not have other aspects that we might think of as psychological, such as guidelines on how to use the money. The mothers were free. These were low-income moms. They were free to spend the money in any way they wished. And so that is the only hint that this was for the child is that the debit card says on it for my baby. And so.
Right. Because that's not a psychological thing at all. Right? Oh my goodness. I've had 2 of my own, and gosh, they're in those early months. Just even the thought of your baby can bring tears to your eyes, okay? So yeah, putting for my baby on the card strongly incentivizes your conscience to spend that money on your baby. How in the world you would call that not a psychological intervention, I have no idea. If you wanted to make it neutral, you would have just made it like, a Visa card or something. Jesus. I don't really have a problem with, what I have a problem with is the idea that you need to incentivize someone who just spent most of a year creating this little person with her body to then care for said little person. Okay? The thing that new mothers might need is, mental health care. Right? Aside from the obvious physical health care. Social support. Financial support. Because you're not working. right? You're just ensuring that the small human you just birthed, survives, and that you didn't just waste everyone's time and resources. To put it, in the brutalistic terms that we're dealing with here. I just, it's so clinical and so removed from what the fuck they're actually talking about. And I love how the one person in this conversation who has any hypothetical possibility of ever actually having anything like this experience has said one thing, maybe two things. Like, she asked one question.
So that was the only, I would say, potential aspect of intervention above and beyond the cash.
Did the moms know that some were getting only 20 and others were getting 333, or were they just given an amount and they were saying, and you just said, here, we're just wanting to see what happens?
Right. Okay. So she's the one who asks that question. See, I feel like her question, she asks much better questions, but then that dude is all up, bespectacled guy's butt. Oh.
And they didn't have any idea what others were receiving.
We have informed the mothers around the design of the study.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, doctor, thank you so much for talking about the study with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be back with more Rising right after.
No, we won't. I'm done tormenting you with that for now. So that is the level of understanding that we're dealing with. This is any kind of mainstream approach to mothers' use of resources. The fundamental application of any resources. Because, yeah, we all have one. That's where we all start. It's baffling to me. This implication, because that's where they're coming from with this, right? The implication is that we just don't know if we can trust these poor mothers with this money. Because obviously they can't be trusted with money, or they would have more. Never mind that their parents were poor, and their parents were poor, and their parents were, and he doesn't mention what race these women are, but in certain cases, I have heard many stories, and I know there are so many more, of amassed resources being simply snatched away by the government under some pretense. They, up to and including, they outlawed something that you do that used to be legal and then come and take your shit. The end. What are you going to do? It's the state. Good luck. But obviously, if you don't know how to manage, if you don't know how to get money, then you can't be trusted with money. It's like saying that someone who doesn't know how to ride a bicycle can't be trusted with a bicycle. I don't think that's how we usually approach things like this. This is just so insulting. But this is the institutional attitude that we're dealing with. This is why Joe Manchin gets away with saying this stupid shit that he does. And he, in large part, was personally responsible for the fact that those child credit payments stopped at the beginning of the year. He campaigned so hard against it in one direction and another. Fear-mongering about our government spending money on the people that it represents. on its citizens. Really? Really? I have, my kid's friend talking to me about how we're on the brink of World War III. These are kids. She's 14. Why in the fuck? They shouldn't be worried about that. We don't have the money for that, obviously. We don't have the money to be starting World War III right now. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. That's backwards, isn't it? Because clearly, the citizenry is not what is important to those people. And I hate to get political. I'm not going to name names. Aside from Joe Manchin, who I hate. Obviously. But, it doesn't matter. Because they both do the same thing. I hate to be both sides, because they're not both. But with the war machine and the just absolutely neglecting and gutting and twisting and weirdness with the entitlement programs. If you think about it, that word welfare sounds lovely, really, if you just look at it on its own. Welfare. But it's a dirty word. It's real funny how they do that kind of thing. Anyways, I am rambling now. And I have been Rad Mom. Absolutely disgusted. This is how you present this. You didn't, I don't know. Get anyone who has any real experience with mothering small children on to talk to this guy. Who set up this interview? Why? It seems kind of out of the blue, which is one of the reasons that we're here discussing it. Because they didn't. Right? They did not get anyone on who knows anything about these topics besides the guy from New York University. Who, I hate to assume someone's gender, but he doesn't strike me as the most maternal type. So, it's once again, we're being talked about and not talked to. And how in the fuck exactly that isn't just basic objectification? This is the attitude. This is the institutional attitude that we're dealing with. Are we sure we can even trust mothers with resources? Yes. If you want to find someone who is most likely to put that money where you want them to, a new mother is probably that person. The worst thing that she might do is go out and splurge on something to, get herself a little bit of retail therapy because, babies and breastfeeding. And y'all don't even want to hear about it. You don't even want to hear about it. Right? The best thing for everyone would be to provide mothers with the resources that they need to do their goddamn job and get the hell out of the way. Oh gosh, that should be assumed. And really, motherhood is not mandatory, obviously, but it is quintessentially female. Because no man will ever do it. And if this isn't proof of, the female hatred in our culture, then I don't know what is. That's depressing. But I'm going to leave you here. This is Rad Mom signing off because we're going on 40 minutes. And it's cold out here. Thank you so much for sticking with me. Mwah. Like the video if you enjoyed my ramblings and these assholes exposing their complete stupidity. And subscribe to the channel for more interesting explorations of what should be the materialist application of, I don't know, anything. Materialist approach to radical feminism. And I'll see you next time. Bye now.